Hi, I'm Allie, the hands behind the turtle trunk, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how to crochet this amigurumi scallion. If you're following along with the Pregnancy Progress Project, this is week 26 when baby and scallion are both about 14 inches long. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Now let's get started. For today's tutorial, you will need medium weight yarn in the colors white, light green, dark green, and light brown, a 4mm or G hook, polyfill stuffing, scissors, a yarn needle, and stitch marker, and optional supplies include two 8mm black safety eyes and black crochet thread. We're going to start off with our white yarn and we're going to begin with a magic circle. So I'm going to take the tail end of my yarn and wrap it around my index finger and my middle finger. Wrap it around once, and when you come back around, cross it over, bring it to the back of your hand, and take your hook and insert it under the first loop. Grab the second loop, pull it under, flip it up, and then we're going to secure the circle with a chain 1. And then for round 1, we are going to work 7 single crochets inside the circle. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I'm going to take the short tail end here and just pull it tight to close up that hole. And for round 2, I'm just going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So we won't be joining, we're just going to work the first stitch into the first stitch from the previous round. So work 1 single crochet into that first stitch. And then I'm going to mark that first stitch with my stitch marker. And then work 1 single crochet into the next stitch, 1 into the next, and 1 into the next, 1 into the next, 1 into the next, and 1 into the last stitch. So at the end of round 2, our stitch count will still be at 7. And for round 3, we're going to be working 2 single crochets into each stitch around. So work 2 single crochets into that first stitch, making sure to replace your stitch marker on the first stitch so you don't lose your spot. Work a second single crochet in that same stitch, then 2 single crochets into the next, 2 single crochets into the next, and we're just going to repeat that around for round 3, working 2 single crochets into each stitch around. And just on the last stitch, and at the end of round 3, our stitch count will now be at 14. For round 4, I'm going to work 1 single crochet into the first stitch, and then 2 single crochets into the next stitch. And we're going to repeat that, 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and then 2 single crochets into the next stitch. We're going to repeat that around for round 4, just 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and 2 single crochets in the next. Just on the last stitch here, so at the end of round 4, our stitch count will now be at 21. And now on to round 5. And for rounds 5 all the way to the end of round 8, we're just going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So starting off with round 5, we're just going to work 1 single crochet into the first stitch, and 1 single crochet into each stitch around. We're just going to continue that to the end of round 8, just working 1 single crochet into each stitch around. And at the end of each round, our stitch count will still be at 21. So I'm just going to continue along and I'll catch up with you guys at the end of round 8. Just coming up to the end of round 8. And at the end of round 8, our stitch count will still be at 21. So now on to round 9. I'm going to work 1 single crochet into the first stitch, and then single crochet 2 together. We're going to repeat that, 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and then single crochet 2 together in the next 2. We're just going to repeat that around for round 9. 1 single crochet in the next stitch, and single crochet 2 together in the next. I'm just coming up to the end of round 9. And at the end of round 9, our stitch count will now be at 14. And I'm going to stop here to add my face to my scallion. If you didn't want to add a face, you can just carry on to round 9. So I'm going to turn it over so that where we're stopping and starting is on the back. And then I'm going to grab my safety eyes and their backings, and then also my black crochet thread and my yarn needle. I'm going to start with my eyes. I think I'm going to place my eyes between rounds 7 and 8. And then I usually leave my eyes about 4 stitches apart. But before I add the backings on, I'm going to add the smile first, because sometimes I need to adjust where the eyes are after putting the smile on. So I'm going to grab my crochet thread, put it through my needle, and then I always just make a little V shape centered between the eyes and then 1 row down. So I'm going to go in beside one eye, down 1 row and in the center, and then back beside the other eye, and then back down in the center. So it just makes a little V shape. I think that's pretty even and good. So I'm going to flip this inside out, put the backings on my eyes, and then tie up the crochet thread. Make sure your eyes are on nice and securely. And then I'll just tie the crochet thread. I don't like to do it too tight, or else if you pull it too tight, the thread kind of hides in between your stitches. So I just do it fairly loosely and do about 3 knots to make sure it's nice and secure. Then I have quite a bit of excess, so I'm just going to trim this a bit. Alright, there we go. So now that we have our face on, we can continue on to round 10. So we're now on to round 10. And for round 10, we're just going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So that's 1 single crochet into the first stitch, 1 into the next, 1 into the next, and we're just going to continue that around. Working 1 single crochet into each stitch around, and at the end of the round our stitch count will still be at 14. And for round 11 we're going to continue on the same thing, just working 1 single crochet in each stitch around again, but we're going to change colors at the end of this round. For round 11, we're just going to do 1 single crochet in each stitch around, but on the last stitch, we're going to change colors to our light green. So we'll just continue along. 1 single crochet into each stitch. And then I have 1 stitch left. So on this last stitch, I'm going to start a single crochet as normal, but before I do that final pull through, I'm going to drop my white and then grab my light green. And then I'm going to finish the final pull through with the green. So I'll wrap the green around my hook and just, and just pull through the last 2 loops with the new color. So that was the end of round 11. So at the end of round 11, our stitch count will still be at 14. And for round 12, we're going to continue on just with the light green now. Just going to kind of pull these tail ends tighter. And we're going to just continue on working 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So after I work this first stitch to secure what's already there, I'm going to trim the white because we don't need that anymore. I'm just going to hide these tail ends on the inside. And then we're just going to continue working 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So that'll be a total of 14 single crochets for round 12. And this is the last stitch of round 12. And now we're on to round 13. And for rounds 13 to 15, so the next 3 rounds, we're just going to continue working 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So this is round 13. And we're going to continue this, working 1 single crochet into each stitch around for a total of 14 single crochets. Just repeat that all the way to the end of round 15. And then at the end of round 15, we're going to change colors again to our dark green. So I'm just going to continue along, and I'll meet up with you guys at the end of round 15, and I'll stop and show you how to do another color change. So I'm just going to continue along, and I'll catch up with you guys at the end of round 15. So I'm just on the last stitch of round 15. So I'm going to start my single crochet as normal, and then drop my green yarn and grab my dark green yarn for our color change. So just like we did from the white to the light green, we're just going to drop our light color, pick up the dark green, and then finish that final pull through with our new color. Okay, and now we're on to round 16. For round 16, we're just going to continue as we have been, working 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So I'm just going to work the first single crochet into the next stitch, and then I'm going to cut off my light green yarn. And then just tuck those ends inside of the scallion. Okay, and then I'm just going to continue along, working 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So I'm just coming up to the end of round 16. And at the end of round 16, our stitch count will still be at 14. And before I move on to the next round, I'm going to stop here and grab my fiber fill stuffing and just start stuffing the bottom of the scallion, because we're going to start closing it up at the top now. So I'm just going to grab some stuffing, and you can put as much or as little in as you'd like. The more you put in, the stiffer it will be. The less you put in, the squishier it will be. So it's really up to you how much you want to add. I think that's good for me, so I'm going to carry on to round 17. And for round 17, this might be a little confusing, but we are going to work in the back loops only. So when you look at the top of your stitches, you'll see that there is a front loop and a back loop. Hopefully you can see that. So we are going to work in the back loop only for this round, and when we do that, the front loop is just going to stick out, and then we're going to come back and work in that front loop. So for round 17, we are going to be working in the back loop only all the way around, and we're going to work 7 single crochets 2 together all the way around. So starting in this first stitch, we're going to start our single crochet 2 together. Working in the back loop only, we're going to continue to the second stitch in the back loop only and work a single crochet 2 together. So that was 1, and we're going to do this a total of 7 times around. So working again in the back loop only, work a single crochet 2 together. We're just going to repeat that around for a total of 7 times. So I'm just on my last single crochet 2 together, and at the end of round 17, our stitch count will now be at 7. And now I'm going to go back to the front loops that we left behind. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a ridge created from those front loops, and I'm going to slip stitch into the very first one. So slip stitch, and then we're going to chain 35, and this is going to be the little spikes that are on a scallion. We're going to start making those. So you can make them as long or as short as you'd like, so it just depends on how long you want to make the chain. You can make it as long as you want. I'm trying to get my scallion to be about 14 inches long. So I'm going to chain 35, but feel free to chain as much or as little as you like. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so I just made 35 chains, and now I'm going to work single crochets back down the chain. So starting in the second chain from my hook, I'm going to work a single crochet into that second chain from the hook, and then I'm going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch down, into each chain down. So I'm just going to continue that along, working 1 single crochet into each chain down. So I'm just coming up to the last couple chains. So since I initially chained 35 and then I worked in the second chain from the hook and came all the way down, I should have a total of 34 single crochets right here. So now that we're back at the bottom, I'm going to skip the next front loop and go into the next one. So skip one, go into the next, and we're going to work a slip stitch. And then we're going to repeat the chain again. So again, you could make it the same length, you can make it longer or shorter. I'm just going to make it the same length, so I'm going to chain 35 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Okay, so that was 35 chains, and then I'm going to go in the second chain from the hook and single crochet all the way down. And we are just going to repeat that all the way around. So at the end, we're going to have a total of 7 of these little chain pieces. So you're just going to chain as many as you want. I'm just going to chain 35 every time, and then work 34 single crochets down each chain. Skip the first front loop and then slip stitch into the second one and work a chain again. So I'm just going to repeat that for a total of 7 times. So I'm just going to continue along, and I'm going to catch up with you guys when I'm done the 7th little chain piece. I'm just coming up to the end of this last chain. So just work the last single crochet in that chain. So I'm going to slip stitch to the very first, just kind of to the stitch right beside the one we just ended on. Slip stitch, oops, sorry. Slip stitch there. I'm going to chain 1 and tie off, leaving about a 6-inch tail, maybe actually a little bit more than that, maybe like a 10-inch tail, because now we're going to close up the little hole that's at the top. So I'm just going to pull that through, pull tight so it's secure. I'm going to grab my yarn needle, thread my yarn, and then if you spread out all these little chains that we made, there's still a small hole right at the top here. So I'm just going to weave the yarn in and out of these last 7 stitches just to close up this hole. So just weave in and out of these little 7 stitches. And then pull tight to close up that hole. And then just secure the yarn at the top with a knot. with a couple knots actually. Make sure it's nice and secure. Do one more. And then I'm just going to weave my end in and hide it in the scallion. So just cut off the excess. So there we have that, and now we're going to just grab that brown yarn, and we need very little of it, and we're just going to add some roots coming down to the end. So if you cut your brown yarn, if we grab, we're going to cut 3 strands, and they're going to be, you want to cut them about 6 inches long. It doesn't really matter how long they are, but we are going to fold them in half. So you want it to be double the length of what you want your root to be. So I'm going to go with about 6 inches. So cut 3 strands. Okay, and I'm going to grab my hook and fold 1 strand in half, like so. And this is going to be like fringe if you've ever made fringe for anything. And we're going to flip it over, so we're working on the bottom, and you're going to insert your hook in the bottom, and we're going to add the 3 strands as evenly around as possible. So I'm just going to go right through the center hole and up a stitch. Wrap the strand around your hook, pull through just like that, and then I'm going to pull these 2 tail ends through this loop, and I'm going to try and make them as even as possible. There we go. And then I'm just going to repeat that again with the other 2. Just go straight through the middle, up through another stitch. Pull the yarn through and pull the tail ends through the loop. And do it one more time. Okay, and I'm just going to split my yarn. So I'm going to take each strand and pull it apart, because right now the yarn is pretty thick, and if we split it, it'll look more like the stringy roots that are on the bottom of scallions. So it'll just make it look a little bit more realistic. So just take each strand and pull it apart. So I just finished pulling apart all those strands. So as you can see, it just makes it look a little bit more realistic with the little root strings hanging down. So there we have our scallion. Thank you guys so much for following along, and I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, I'd love to have you a part of the Turtle Trunk family. You can find this pattern along with other free patterns on my new blog, whoshomemade.com. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and be sure to tag me in your photos to show off your finished turtle trunk creations. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.